So, today's video, as you can see here, is asking, does devaluation of a currency against another currency cause inflation? The answer is no, but let's have a look. Let's imagine we have a king, and this king, his kingdom has coins. One of the coins, and in this kingdom, there's a certain amount of gold, and all the coins that have been minted under the authority of this king match the gold supply. So let's not imagine that the gold is hoarded somewhere. The gold is in the coins. The king says each coin is worth, one of a coin is worth, let's say, 1 gram of gold. There's 1 gram of gold in each coin. And so that means the number of coins is equal to the grammage of gold in circulation in this kingdom, in this closed economy. What happens if one day the mint, the place that's producing the coins, under the king's authority, halves the gold content? The coins still claim to be 1 gram of gold, but in reality, they're only half a gram. And so the coin circulation in the kingdom doubles. And the king and the institutions in the kingdom receive this extra money to create demand for various things. Now, technically, the coin, the currency of the kingdom, has devalued against gold. Before it was 1-to-1, now it's 2-to-1. The currency has weakened against gold. Sorry, this is gold. But what happens because of the doubling in demand, what happens if this stimulates an increase in the production in real goods and services as well? So just to demonstrate, here's a t-shirt. So there's been a doubling of the goods and services because of the increased monetary demand in the currency of this closed economic area, this kingdom where people trade with each other. So the kingdom's currency has technically devalued against gold, if we consider gold as another currency, but it hasn't devalued against real goods and services, which means there's been no inflation in the prices of real goods and services in this economy. So the devaluation against gold hasn't caused inflation. But an even more interesting question is, has there even been a devaluation? Or what sort of devaluation has occurred? The question is, why is a currency valuable in the first place? Anything could be a currency. The t-shirts could be a currency, but they're not, because they're not desired as a currency. They're somehow less desirable for the purpose of being a common unit of account than coins or gold. A common unit of account is something you can have, and everything else is all the real goods and services, their prices, their relative prices, relative value between each other, can be measured against this other thing, which makes it a useful currency. And one of the things that makes a currency desirable is its stability. Now, a claim that could be made in this scenario is that the king's currency is the one that's unstable, because it is under the power of a person who can manipulate or manage that currency, doubling it, for example. But if the purpose of a currency is to buy goods and services, then its stability can only be measured against how well it does its job in buying goods and services. And for example, if there's been a doubling of the coinage, the people in the kingdom, people in the kingdom who before had the previous amount of coinage was there amongst them circulating, and now there's an additional nominal amount of coinage in there circulating, and this additional amount has meant there's been a doubling of the goods and services in there circulating. There's been no instability of the currency. There's been no loss of value of the previous amount of coins that were held, and there's been no basis to assume that there's been any price instability, because we're assuming here that the quantity theory doesn't hold, and so this additional monetary demand has created a real increase in production. So which currency has actually experienced instability? Well, it's been the gold, because of the gold as a non-manageable currency. It has a more or less naturally fixed quantity. It has experienced deflation. The fixed amount of gold against an increase in goods and services have meant the prices of all these things have gone down in terms of gold. The purchasing power of gold has gone up. So now 1 gram of gold can buy 2 shirts, but it can also buy 2 coins, which can buy 2 shirts. So while 1 unit of the king's currency has devalued against 1 gram of gold, has the currency itself lost value? The answer is no. Let's imagine that these changes in the exchange rate between the two currencies occurs instantaneously, which means there's no chance to profit from arbitrage. So during this, in reality, when such a process of exchange adjustment would occur, when these new money was being issued, you would perhaps, someone could speculate, buy gold with that, swap their king's currency into gold on the belief that the gold would appreciate. There's deflation in the prices in terms of gold. And so they would gain by swapping their one currency into 1 gram of gold, which then afterwards is worth, the 1 gram of gold is worth 2 currency, and they can swap it back and make a profit. But that's speculation. And so if we imagine that the exchange adjustment occurs instantaneously, we remove this from consideration for a moment. So if there is no gain to be made by speculation, then in effect there has been no change in value between one currency and the other. If you have 1 gram of gold, you can buy 2 coins and 2 t-shirts. But if you have 2 coins, you can buy 1 gram of gold. After the adjustment has occurred, there's no value in having your purchasing power in one currency over the other. Now, I've said in a very simplistic way that the increase in the monetary demand, the coinage in circulation, brought about by the king, led to a one-to-one increase in the production of real goods and services. But what we have to actually think of in the first place is that the real income of society is indeterminable. There's always new products being brought in, old ones losing their value. So people no longer demand old ones because there's new, better ones. Efficiencies, more people, less people, constant change in the real production of society. And so it's possible to say that, first of all, it's possible to say that the king's currency is a more desirable currency to have because it can stimulate increased production. It's sort of a tool of communication. There's an increased production, there's an increased amount of coinage, and if everyone's sort of agreed on this, that everyone wants to work a bit more or try and innovate a bit more to have a higher income, and everyone mutually does that in response to this increased demand, it's a self-fulfilling promise. So the production happens and it doesn't lose its value. But more importantly, in terms of the question of stability, if the real production in the world is inherently unstable, indeterminable, isn't the currency which can respond to this and even manage it the more stable currency? This is a little example of this, where of course an adjustable income production, there's at least the possibility that the monetary demand in a symbolic currency, let's say, that can be itself managed, can match this real change in production. But this isn't possible with a quantitatively fixed currency like gold. To make the point a bit clearer, let's imagine there's been this doubling of the currency and of production, but the king or his treasury continues to maintain the exchange rate between his currency and gold the same. The value of the currency in terms of 1 unit of the currency hasn't devalued against gold. And he can do this if he promises to always give out 1 gold in exchange for 1 coin. Or at least if the people think he can do this. Sorry, I did that wrong. That should be, here should be 2 pieces of gold. So there's been no change in the exchange between the currency and gold. So that at least if there's the belief that this convertibility can be honored by the king, then just like I said before, that in the end there's been no devaluation of the currency because you can continue to exchange them, and both are just as equally as useful for buying goods, real goods and services. The same occurs, but just at the old exchange rate. The question is this possible, this convertibility? And the answer is yes, because if the only thing people are interested in the end, is goods and services, they don't care if they have the king's currency or the real gold. And if it turns out that there's advantages to the currency in terms of its standardization, its legal backing by a strong legal system, strong authority, then the desirability of gold essentially diminishes to 0, because it's either or, because of the manageability of the currency. If the conversion rate can be maintained 1-to-1, you're essentially assimilating the 2 currencies into one. They're one currency. It doesn't matter that the coin only has half the gold or no gold if the exchange, for example, to 1 coin to 1 gram of gold, as if it contained 1 gram of gold, can be maintained. And why can it be maintained? Because the king's coinage is a more stable currency. So if it's adjusted to meet the real level of production, all the coinage that exists is going to continue to be demanded, happily held by the people of the kingdom to exchange their goods and services. And so long as that happens, there's no desire for gold. There's an important realization to be made here. This idea that, here's a bank, that the development of modern fiat currencies somehow started off with a backing of the currencies by gold. Yes, everyone found the coinage more convenient, so they stopped using the gold itself, but it still had to be backed by the gold. And so banks stockpiled gold to ensure this convertibility. But if the thing that people actually want to convert into, the convertibility that actually has to be maintained, are the goods and services, and that convertibility means price stability within this currency, then the convertibility against gold or any other currency is completely immaterial. There is no such thing as gold backing a currency in a closed economy. That's what we're talking about here. Because the currency in circulation has a stability in relation to goods and services in that economic area. This brings us back to our question, does devaluation cause inflation? The answer is no. The inflation is a matter between, inflation is an internal thing between the goods and services and the currency. So if there is devaluation against another currency, for example gold, it's because of the inflation. Because these two currencies, the coinage and gold, were essentially 100% overlapping currencies, claim on the same goods and services in one closed economy. Then the devaluation, or the exchange between these two currencies, is determined by their mutual inflation or deflation, their internal price development in terms of goods and services. In the natural case, there was price stability in the coinage, but there was deflation in the gold. This caused a change in the exchange rate. In the case where the king assured convertibility, this had the effect of preventing deflation in the gold prices. But in the end, this can only happen if the gold's actually irrelevant, because of course there is a limited amount of gold. This convertibility, like I said, assimilates the gold into the same currency, so you can either have a coin or have gold and buy goods and services with it. This is different from the theory of gold of backing. It's a different historical development for modern fiat currencies. And what happened isn't that first there was a very strong connection between gold continuing to back the coinage that was actually used, and this sort of dissipated to purely symbolic money. That's not what happened. It's that the gold just became another amount of quantity of the money in circulation. But if the other form of money that constituted that currency was manageable itself, then the part which is gold just becomes irrelevant. It's much easier just having the completely symbolic, manageable monetary form as 100% of the monetary demand versus having part of it this, part of it that. And this is why gold has been, we're leaving aside international trade where there's a tension, because gold retains its independent value as a claim on a different circulation of goods and services outside of the closed economy. But in terms of its use inside the closed economy, there is no backing, there is no gold backing. It was just relegated to be hoarded by banks, because if this convertibility is in fact true, which it is, you don't need it, because when you need to manage the money supply, you can do it entirely with a fiat currency. So in a closed economic area where there's two overlapping currencies that can be either essentially represent purchasing power for the same pool of goods and services, as soon as one has an advantage over another, and the big advantage is stability, which means the fiat currency will have the big advantage over a fixed quantity currency like gold, that means it's an absolute advantage. There's absolutely no reason to have the gold. It becomes relegated to uselessness. And so there is no devaluation. Think about it, this is important. Even if the king didn't do this guarantee, the stability of the coinage would be maintained so long as it was used to maintain a production level. There would be no demand for gold. And if there's no demand for something, the quantity relationships between two things become irrelevant. It's useless saying there's a 2-to-1 quantity relationship between the coinage in gold if there's no demand for the gold. It means there is no exchange rate. And so the important thing in a fiat currency is to maintain this relation between monetary demand and production.